Good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 749. It is the weekly show that's all about weather. It's Tuesday night special. We're doing this on Tuesday, May 26th, 2020. We're delaying one day because of Memorial Day, which was yesterday. And for the second week in a row, we're going to be doing a total convoluted mess here as we are doing a Zoom and Google Meet mashup. But for those that don't know, the pre-show here on WeatherBrains, the magical, marvelous time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say really, really, really outrageous things. So we have Jen and Bill look actually good. I mean, let me rephrase that. They always look good, but now they're coming in regular resolution. Last week, it looked like I was getting data off a 1200 baud modem. So modem, that's the way we say it. So what I've got to do here is, and for those watching on the tube here live, and thank you for watching. So the way I have to make this work in order to get Google Meet on the air live, it's to do a screen share on Zoom. And before I do it this time, I tell you what, let me. Well, I have to go live on YouTube. You cannot go live on YouTube via Google Meet, which makes no sense at all. Well, they're not using Zoom; they're using Google Meet. I mean, they're playing by the rules. All right, so strap in. I think I've learned a lot from last week's disaster. Now, why we had the low bandwidth look to this day, I have no earthly idea. I do not know. I'm doing 900 up and 900 down here. I mean, I go back. This is my last week here at home. So Monday, I go back to Studio A at the TV station, which is the one thing I'm going to miss. It's the bandwidth here. I mean, I've got gigabit fiber at this house, and at the station, it's a little constrained, but it's clear and free. I have my own network, and we have charter cable for the weather operation, and it's like 150 megs, which is great. I mean, under normal circumstances, that's great bandwidth. But here you got this gigabit. Like, whoop. I mean, you send a video file, whoop, it's gone. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see it's going to be different. You might see how the sausage is made here. If you missed it, you saw all the sausage last week. So I'm going to do a screen share, and this is going to be a situation where I have to include the audio. We've learned that. So let's see here. See if I can make this puppy fly. Now, here we go, advanced. And I know that I have to click on share computer sound. I did not have that clicked last week. And for the few minutes, you couldn't hear anybody. And we are going to share a portion of the screen. So here we go. And I am going to get this box all sized here. And in theory, of course, when everybody gets on here, we're going to have multiple boxes, I guess. It says your screen sharing is paused. Resume share. Why is my screen sharing paused here? So what I have to do now is go over here to actually YouTube on another device and look at it to see what's going out over the air. I have never had this screen sharing paused thing on here before. That's interesting. Well, let's just stop that for a minute. If you're, tell you what, let me get over here and get a monitor so I can see what's going out over the air. Okay, now we have a monitor so I can see. So let's go back and do this screen share. We're going to do a portion of the screen. And you're going to click on share. Oh, yeah. Y'all say something. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Oh, man.
We're speechless all of a sudden.
I know. Pressure's on.
How about this Category 2 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico next Monday?
Oh, my goodness.
According to the GFS.
Oh.
Can you say Hurricane Audrey? Uh-oh, I shouldn't have said that. The 18Z run has it over toward Corpus Christi.
Oh, wow.
Ensembles have it all over the Gulf. It looks...
I've had problems with that today. I've had problems with it today. All the face bag people, you know, they just went ballistic. And of course, they say that they say, oh, well, I've disclaimed that this is long-range computer model output, but models show hurricanes slamming into the Gulf Coast. And so 1 million people share it, and I deal all day with, is this true? Is this true? Do I need to cancel my vacation? Do I need to go check on my elderly relative that lives in Gulf Shores? But all day, that's all I've been doing because these kids, you know, do the 384 share thing. And, and you know, you know, they need an outlet. They need to be creative, but they don't need to be doing this. I mean, and what they'll say, ooh, I made a disclaimer. I said, this is long range computer model output. People don't read that. You don't know anything about weather communication. You have no earthly idea how this works. But they've learned that if they do that, they're going to get thousands and thousands and thousands of likes and shares in their popularity. And what happens, and what's the weirdest thing about this, these people that follow these sites, they follow it like it's a religion. And
wait a minute, I got to refresh my screen. Hold on a second.
If you come up against any of these people, they will attack you. Their followers. It is like, it's brutal.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Well, it is. It is.
Brutal.
Well, especially for valid broadcasters like us, you know, we're having to deal with all that.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. All right, for James and I'm just kidding. No, but we're having to battle that. And it's ridiculous because then it ruins the credibility of broadcasters, in my opinion, having that on there and having those kids just pumping all those models out and then saying it's a real forecast and not putting the disclaimers.
I was just saying what Kevin Law said. That's all I said.
I said it.
Hi, Kevin. Nice to meet you.
Kevin has opened up a face bag page. This is Kevin's Facebook Forecast Center. We forecast hurricanes 4 weeks in advance.
They've been talking about doing a spoof Facebook account for me, so I don't have anything to do with that.
Kevin actually showed up on Slack, and we were shocked. We were stunned. And Slack is not really a social network. That's a communication platform. It's not a social network. It's closed, but it was so awesome to see Kevin on Slack. My heart was warm.
It's the power of peer pressure.
Are you guys allowed to be on Discord, or is that too social too? Like a Discord chat? Kevin? Yeah. Do you know much about Discord?
I think the only thing that's been banned pretty much is Zoom right now.
Yeah, because we have a Tornado Talk Discord channel. The kids on there focus on the past, which is great. They do a great job talking about, we do have a whole history channel. And every day they take an event and they just talk about it. So we're hoping we can get some more meteorologists and National Weather Service folks on there to to engage some of the discussion, because I mean, I'm impressed with these kids. They know their stuff.
Yeah, see, I think that's great. I feel like in some regards, like this Discord, I miss out on a lot, but then I see all the negativity that comes with it, and I'm like, oh, I'm not missing out on anything.
Yeah, I'm mom on Discord. Yeah. So we have strict rules. We do not want a bunch of shenanigans, and we really try to keep it. So because we do have the history, but we also do live weather and real time stuff, and we try to keep it in line where they aren't going off the rails on stuff, and it's very. So then we also have our general chat where they can get a little bit more loosey goosey and talk about whatever. But yeah, they call me mom on there. So
keep them in line.
Yeah, that's right.
I think Kevin has a Twitch channel that he's not telling us about. He's one of these gamer guys and has 1 million followers on Twitch. So for those watching live, what's really odd, I can't get in there and do any screen actions in the area where there's a share going on. So I'm having to move this thing around to admit people into this thing. And I also need to see how we make people full screen, because we are all back in the Hollywood Squares thing. And I thought I had disabled all of these plugins where that was not going to happen. So let me see. Oh boy. I'm looking at every plugin I have in this browser, and I don't see a Google Meet thing. So are you guys seeing the Hollywood Squares, or do you see a full screen? And I can't hear a word Bill's saying now.
No, that was my fault. I muted myself to speak to L. But so yeah, I see four. I see the four of you.
So last week I was able to, and again, I'm trying to get it set, and we could do it this way if we have to, but it was better when it's full screen, so the person talking it looks better for people watching live. And
we're overrun with NC State people again. Oh.
That's not a bug; it's a feature.
Show title. Okay. So let me turn this up. Yeah, we at least, it looks good tonight. Still not as good as Zoom. It's not. It is just not as, the resolution is not as good. And I've got the thing, just as high as we can go.
I mean, I have to, every time I do this, I have to log in and go to the details and switch it to an HD feed up. I don't know if that's for everybody, but the maximum is 720p.
Yeah, that's what I've done. There's a little 3 buttons in the lower right, and you go to settings.
But I have to do that every time I log on to this. Go in there and switch it.
I got 720p and send and receive.
I just switched to that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, if y'all could switch to that, that would be nice.
Jennifer, I just noticed yours got better, so I definitely tell the difference.
Okay.
So how do you do that?
So how do you get rid of the Hollywood Squares and go to a full screen on this thing? That's what I don't.
You go to change layout, and then hit spotlight. So same things, 3 dots, bottom right, just above settings. It says change layout.
Change layout.
And switch that bad boy to spotlight.
Oh yeah. Oh,
only the host have to do that.
I think everybody can control that for themselves.
Okay.
I actually prefer the Hollywood Squares thing because I like snooping on people.
Yeah, for
gonna make sure people, Jennifer's not causing trouble over there because
that's right.
She's a troublemaker.
That's right.
Well, sidebar works well because it puts focus on the person speaking.
Where do you change the resolution?
So if you go to the little 3 dots in the bottom right-hand corner of the deal, and then hit settings, and in the top bar, click on middle.
Okay.
And then it should say send resolution and receive resolution to switch both those bad boys to 720p, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Yeah, mine's already there. Okay.
And I think it's going to like scale it based on your bandwidth and everything. So
does my audio sound okay?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Better than mine.
I'm using a new microphone, so.
Hi, Dr. Kim.
Hey, Nate. Hey, guys. Chris.
Hey,
and
Kim.
Kevin, it's good to see you both.
It's Dr. Kim, Jennifer, and 4 bald white guys.
Show title. That's a show title. Wow.
Semi-diverse, yeah.
Wow.
I am here for the show titles, ladies and gentlemen.
He churns them out.
That's my role in the company now. I don't do email. I'm the chief show title officer.
That's not a bad job.
So, when you get that little the chat thing on the sidebar. Okay, I see.
That's something that I don't care for. This is that the chat can't be permanent. Like it wants to cover up.
Away.
I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so I've got what I've got now. I've got the I think I've got the layout set here, so we can start this big bad puppy. Get this sucker rolling here. And again, for those watching on the live stream, remember, you get to see how the sausage is made. I've gone to another desktop. The way I do things, and everybody's different. I use multiple desktops, and this is Audio Hijack Pro, which is a virtual routing program. This is how we get the soundboard in so the guests can hear it. This is how we record the show. So I'm going to record.
You should not be mentioning names unless they've paid for sponsorships.
That's true. We'll send.
You gotta Greek the labels, until they're going to pay for it.
I think the company that makes this software is called Rogue Amoeba. So I'll send them an invoice when this is all over. All right, let's, and again, I'm going to get the soundboard up, and I think people that are watching on YouTube can see the soundboard as well. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is made possible by the generous support of TradeWeather, which allows you to enter into financial trades based on the outcome of future weather events. Get a $10 trading credit and learn more at tradeweather.com.
Hey, it's WeatherBrains, a Tuesday night special. WeatherBrains episode number 749. This is for the 26th of May, 2020. We are on the verge of getting into meteorological summer, which is always exciting, but thank you for joining us tonight. And we're going to have a good show, and I see Dr. Kim Cloco McLean on the line with us from Norman, Oklahoma. Dr. McLean, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. So any news? Your end, everything going okay? Any exciting grants?
No news is good news.
Yeah, no news is good news. Yeah.
Yeah, no news can be good news. Well, it feels like because I've been just in my house, it's hard to even remember what I have or haven't talked with you guys about. Time is such an anomaly to me anymore. But we're just carrying on with the work of the lab. We've had to cancel experiments that we had planned for the year where we would have brought in forecasters, managers, broadcasters. I know it's been a real, it's been a sad thing and sort of a headache. And actually one of the things we're trying to think through now is we're being encouraged by NOAA to consider whether we can do some of these things virtually instead of bringing people into our test bed facility. And it wouldn't be the same, but it might be something that we have to do. So that's a sneak peek into the world of science. We're still trying to keep the arc of technology development going, but and get input from all of those groups before we move forward with anything. But we just might have to do what everybody's having to do and do it virtually.
You got to do what you got to do. I mean, that's just the way it is. And let's see. Nate, you got to do what you got to do. How are you tonight, sir? What's happening in North Carolina?
Doing all right. We're just gearing up for another wet week here. Last week, it was an upper level low. This week, it's a tropical wave. But as far as I'm concerned, if it keeps us out of the 90s, bring it on.
It's a win. It's a win. Yeah, we kind of have the same thing down here. We got this upper low feature west of here, and it's been raining pretty much all day long. Jennifer, how's the weather where you are tonight?
Hey, pretty good. Central Ohio. It was 87 yesterday in Columbus. May 20th, it was 56. So we went from fall to summer all of a sudden. So I prefer this right now, I'll tell you, not the mid 50s. But no, it's been great. We had a great Memorial Day. I got to spend time with my family and had a cookout, and it was good. It felt normal. So I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Aubrey, are you here? I see you
I
are
am
here.
here.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Google
Welcome.
sent my invite to junk.
What? This is a Google product. So the
man.
Google invitation to a
Google knows
Google
more
Meet
about
went
this
to
show
junk.
than we do.
I tossed it right down the drain.
Yeah, they know exactly
title.
what this is. Yeah. So, welcome. Well, what's happening in your world in lovely
Beautiful.
Harrisonburg, Virginia?
Beautiful Harrisonburg. The mountaintops are finally green. Late May, and they're finally green. Last week, I was telling myself as we were in the 50s, don't turn on the heat. You're not turning on the heat. And this week, we've pushed 80 degrees, and I'm like, don't turn on the AC. Do not turn on the AC yet. But it's been really, really, really nice.
Awesome. Well, good deal. All right. Well, Bill Murray. And by the way, for me, this is next week. I will be back in the WeatherBrains corporate headquarters in Studio A. So this will be my last week of working at home, WTH, for a while. Wait a minute.
WFH.
Yeah,
WTH is what we say a lot when we watch the show.
What the hell was that?
Thank you,
People
Troy.
already. Yeah, well, see, Troy just made it here. Yeah, when Troy jumped on, that's why I say WT.
Just right.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you didn't go the other way because I would have said it. So
That's why we love you, Troy.
I know that. Yeah.
How did the show go down the tube so quick? We've gone down the tube 7 minutes in. This is not good. So
I've only been here for 2 minutes. So yeah.
all right, Bill, let's bring our guest in before they run for the hills.
This is one of those places you want to keep your F's and your T's in the right places.
Yeah, I'm about to say, man, I'm in big trouble.
I tell myself that daily.
Yeah, as if on cue, Friday at 5 o'clock, the air conditioning in the upstairs of our house went out completely.
Yeah,
and so you quickly went to 84 degrees in the second story of our house. So we lived through the weekend. So I was really thankful that we were in the 70-degree range today with rain all day. So I want to thank our guests tonight for their outstanding weather delivery techniques. First, we have the Science and Operations Officer from the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Kevin Laws. Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Bill. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you doing okay?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, get past the forecast bust for today anyway. So
I don't think it was a bust at all. I think this was a great forecast. So I'll take it all day, every day. So
I left the office at 1 o'clock. It was 71 degrees, and I was like, we're a far cry from the 85 that I had in there.
That's all right. Well, you get a pass based on this.
Do you guys have a 3-degree guarantee down there?
We pushed ours out to 15 today.
Yeah, the 15-degree guarantee. That's
I like that one, Kevin. I like that one. I'm gonna go with that one. Yeah,
works. We had to give out $1,000 to one of our callers.
What?
That's awesome. And we have the meteorologist.
You're the federal government. You can just print that stuff.
That's true. We're handing out money like hotcakes right now.
Yeah, really. I had Trump sign the check for you.
Yeah, they're handing out money for going back to work
there
now.
It is.
Here, so
there it is.
So, and we have the meteorologist in charge from the National Weather Service in Birmingham. We hadn't had him on the show yet, so we're really thrilled tonight to have Chris Darden with us. Chris, welcome to the show. And you may be muted. There we go.
Hey guys, thanks.
Now we
for
see
having
and
me.
hearing you. Yeah, it's good to have you here tonight. So thank you for that, for the great weather today. So keep it up tomorrow, because I won't get my air conditioner till Thursday. So we appreciate that. It's turning out to be an NC State night again. Kim, this is like the third straight week. This is getting scary.
It is. I feel like it's a conspiracy. Oh, conspiracy.
I was gonna say I like Nate's shirt, and so It's funny. I've noticed with the Alumni Association, they only call when state is getting. I've told Kevin this. They only call when state's getting boat raced in a sports event. Last year they called when UNC was smoking us in the fourth quarter, and they called about a week ago, and they were looking for additional donations. And I was asking them, hey, what does the fall sports season look like, football season? And they said, well, we're kind of waiting to see what the COVID-19 looks like. And said, well, why is that an issue for state football? Because I said, we've been practicing social distancing on defense for about 3 to 4 years.
Ooh.
So I don't see water being an issue for us. And they hung up on me. So I don't know if they're going to be calling me anymore or not. So. Well, anyway, I'm glad to be here. So I'm here for
one of our associates on the hotel side. Wife works for an SEC school, and it's an SEC school where let me say they generally have more fans from the visiting school than they have from the home team. So I'll leave it to your imagination who it is. So he said on the call today, he said an SEC school that I won't name. Is going to limit its attendance to 20% for this coming year. And I said, oh, they just won't let the fans from the visiting schools come and they'll be fine. And I did not receive a warm welcome. And I said that at all. I was just kidding. But, and I'd say this for Kim and Troy's benefit. I was just watching, I'm desperate for any college football at all. So I've turned to the Longhorn Network, so after dinner tonight, I see the 1981 Oklahoma UT game, and guess who's calling it? Troy, tell me who would be calling that game. I bet James Spann knows.
I'm like James. We're not that old. We're not that old.
No, Jackson. Keith Jackson and Frank Broyles.
Yeah, okay.
Whoa,
okay.
Nelly. Whoa, Nelly.
It was just like warm waves washing over me. It's like, what are we going to do, to have that come back? So,
well, if you'd asked me A&M, I could have answered it instead of Texas. I just teach.
Well, I always think about you being there, but you're an A&M guy. I hear A&M's coming back big time. They're going to go full bore, right?
I guess. I hope so.
We hope.
I do some work for the athletic department, so I have to stay quiet and out of it. So,
well, the virus has hit us all very, very hard. Chris, you and Kevin, talk to us for a minute about how it's hit the office. What's it like to be in a weather service office now with the virus amongst us?
I'll talk a little bit as a supervisor, and then Kevin can talk a little bit from the ops area because he's actually worked a fair amount in shifts. But it's been challenging. I mean, Kim talked about already, how they've had to change their posture in terms of field experiments and the test bed. But even going back to the spring, March, and April when we were really busy, a lot of what we've done in the office, we sort of pulled back. Like for instance, during severe weather, we transferred all our office calls to a person who was actually working telework remotely, and we've never really done a lot of telework in the field offices, so this was a new thing for us. And in terms of teleworking, we've had probably 10 to 12 people teleworking each day. And so it's really unusual for us. Even during impact weather, they have people doing maybe just some decision support, some social media, handling calls, doing some storm reports remotely, and just trying to distance ourselves as much as we can in operations while trying to not degrade operations at all. So obviously during the Easter event, we had a lot of people in the office, maybe not as much as we normally would, but we still staffed up while trying to socially distance ourselves. But in terms of our outreach, our offsite opportunities, staffing up EOC, a lot of that's been turned to virtual as well. So it's been a transition. But it's been one that I think we've done as effectively as possible. And honestly, I think we've sort of opened up some potential for the future. We've realized that a lot of these things that we've done in the office, we actually can do a lot of those remotely So I think there's been a positive, and I think, James can probably speak to that from the media side too. So a lot of the stuff that we feel like, okay, we all have to push to the office to do, there's some things that we actually can do remotely and do it fairly effectively. But I'll let Kevin talk about from the office perspective.
Yeah, Chris and Kevin both. I mean, last 24 hours, we got word that Environment Canada, one of their forecast centers, has been shut down up in Canada. So I assume it has to be a concern, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, we got word of that over the weekend, and that's easily could happen to any office, and backup mode is in the agencies is pretty robust, but it's not set up, where you can do it day in and day out. So if you have an office, our sister office is Atlanta, and they're busy, probably not as busy as we are as far as weather is concerned, but they have the Hartsfield Airport that they have to deal with, and that's just a beast on its own. You almost have to dedicate one person to that airport. So what happens when and I don't think any office, especially that I know of in the nation, has had to go to full backup operations because of it. Thank goodness. I mean, I guess it could happen any day, but what happens to the office? If we had to back up Atlanta, we would have to go back to almost full staff and maybe more into our office. So that, exposes us. So you alleviate one problem and then you create a new one at the backup office potentially. So there are other systems in place, though, like the regional headquarters that could back up any office at any time. But again, the prolonged, if an office, say, had to quarantine for 14 days, that would be very difficult for a backup office to fulfill, I could imagine. So I was really impressed with, all of the field offices are not really designed, as Chris was mentioning, for telework. And we basically, on a dime, had to stop what we were doing and figure it out rather quickly. And I was really impressed that we were able to put a plan together and implement it almost in a day's notice. Because when that order came down, from headquarters, national headquarters, it was, you will do this. And so we basically had to stop everything. And like Chris said, there's things that we could do it from home, but most of our systems are set up where you have to be there. If you want to issue a severe weather warning, you have to be sitting physically in that chair. You can't do something like that from home. So I was pretty impressed with the way that we were able to transition. Every office in the country was able to successfully do it. A little bit different strategies here and there, but for the most part, working from home has been really a success, in my opinion.
So it sounds like you weren't given these strategies from national. It sounds like each office came up with its own. Is that a true statement, or were there some guidelines? What did they tell you?
We were given some latitude in terms of we were given some ideas of what we could do, but it was really sort of thinking outside the box. Like, for instance, I'll throw Tallahassee out there. I know that Tallahassee, talking to Tom Johnstone down there, they have done a lot outside the office. In terms of social media, for instance, even during a big severe weather event, they've had a fairly limited staff, and they've had a lot that has been done remotely, where some offices maybe have sort of kept more people in the office during an event. So it's dependent a little bit in your operations, how your operations is set up. For instance, we have a couple of AWIP systems that are much more remote, so someone can go into a room, separate themselves, and still do operations similar to kind of how Norman is set up. Huntsville is set up that way too. I came from the Huntsville office, so they can sort of socially distance and space themselves. So we were given some latitude, but I think it was sort of, you kind of learn on the fly, so to speak. But like Kevin said, we weren't given a lot of time. I think kind of the genesis of it was there were some kind of tests that came back positive at the Department of Commerce up in DC. And that was like on a Friday or Saturday, and we had to have this done on a Monday. So it was a pretty quick that it came down, and we had to act pretty fast.
So can you share sort of some of the guidelines from a supervisory standpoint, what you have to do if you were to have a positive case? Chris, what would be the steps? Would it involve quarantining the whole office? Would that one person be quarantined? Is it sort of like the CDC guidelines, or how does it work?
I can give you an example. I won't list the office, but I'll say in the Weather Service, there was an individual in an office where it was a presumed positive case. He notified his supervisor. The supervisor moved up the chain. They called in a deep cleaning crew. The office was closed for 24 hours. The entire office was sent home and sort of quarantined. In this case, the test came back and it was negative. So the office was able to reopen after a 24-hour period. But if the test had come back positive, anyone that had been in contact with him, probably at the office, which would have been a large number of people, they may well have been quarantined until they had either tested negative or the 14-day period had passed. So it's like, like Troy mentioned, the Environment Canada office, I think that was Quebec office, they pretty much got shut down for a 14-day period. So I think in that case, they had 4 positives at the office and two more presumed positives at the Quebec office. So it was pretty widespread. So we've been fortunate, my understanding, in the WFOs that has not occurred. But we were given specific guidelines. We also had to check with our cleaning staffs at the individual offices that they could follow the CDC cleaning guidelines if a potential positive or a potential incident were to occur. And let's say it were to occur at the Birmingham office, our cleaning staff could come in and do that required cleaning fairly quickly. We could close the office, have our backup office in Atlanta, and maybe if our secondary backup Huntsville needed to take over some of it too, and then we could self-quarantine until we got the clearance to go back.
Hey, Chris and Kevin, you guys and we all had a very busy month of April. Let's just look at Easter Sunday. How did this affect your Easter Sunday severe weather operations? That was a big severe weather day.
Kevin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, really, we didn't have much of a choice but to staff up. I mean, we can't let operations go completely. Our workstations are already really set up for distancing anyway, because most meteorologists are introverts as it is, and so they're already about 6 feet apart.
Out of my space.
Yeah, well, look, we have seating arrangements. I'm sure you can relate, but yep. We just have to be extra vigilant, a little careful. A lot of times we're over the shoulder of each other looking at some things, and we probably had to cut a lot of that out. And but we knew that we had a mission. So at the same time, I think everybody has that sort of sense of duty. So we had to put the virus on hold just for at least that day, because we knew there was going to be potential life-saving warnings, which there were. A lot of success stories from that day. And in fact, I think the entire area, we didn't have any injuries or maybe just some minor things, but no fatalities, thank goodness. And, that event could have turned out a lot worse than what it was. I mean, we saw just a couple of counties away in Mississippi where another, EF4 killed a lot of people and had a destructive path of, hundreds of miles, several of them. So, but, I think we just had to be very mindful, very careful. But at the same time, I think we just had to continue with the mission. So.
And Chris mentioned a couple of specific jobs like social media. How did you do that, Kevin?
Usually the social media, I think, was done in-house for that event. We had several events in April. I think there were several where we farmed it out to people's homes, or at least they were helping. The bigger one was, like Chris was mentioning before, our phone system is really easy to forward to somebody's home, so we're able to do that very easily. Social media is a little bit tougher because, we try to, you have to be timely with it, and having somebody in the office that's right across from the radar operator is really helpful because they can get that out pretty quick. I can imagine there would be some delay if they were at home, and some of that's, you're down to the minutes. And so it's probably best to have that person in a high, where you're going to be issuing a lot of warnings, it's high volume. It's probably best to have that person in the office. So the day-to-day stuff, I mean, I think we could easily, have somebody at home do that. And, it's not really all that, the traffic's not that much anyway, but for a major or moderate risk, we probably need to have that person in the office for sure.
Kim, you had a question. Go ahead with it.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Well, you mentioned the April events, and as we all know, that's when things were really taking off with with COVID, and everyone was trying to manage competing risks, things like severe weather and the virus. Can you talk a little bit about how your office dealt with trying to advise the population on how they ought to think about things like sheltering? That definitely changed some of the nature of messaging that needed to happen before those events took place.
Yeah, Kim, that's a good question. I mean, it was a little bit of a challenge, and we were one of the things that we're doing sort of in conjunction. Actually, we're still doing it. Is we're having now every other day we're having calls with the state to provide weather briefings, weather updates. It's primarily a COVID-19 call, but we're also doing weather briefings. And way back in March, but going way back a couple of months ago. One of the conversations we were having leading into severe weather season right at the very beginning was how do we message this? And we worked with the Department of Public Health to put out a statement to try to have some information for people. Okay, this is how we feel the threat is relative to COVID-19 for sheltering. It wasn't perfect. We didn't necessarily want perfection to be the enemy of the good, so to speak. Hindsight, we might have worded some things a little bit different, but we try to get that information out there to the public. We were getting some calls. People were asking, concerned, are shelters going to be open? Do I need to bring a mask? Do I need to bring my own cleaning supplies? So we're getting quite a bit of calls on social media, and those are some things we're trying to message in conjunction with state EMA and ADPH. And I think it may have been the Easter event, or it may have been the 19th, maybe the event after that, the week after, where there were some municipalities that said they were going to close shelters, and once they got some blowback or whatever, and they ended up opening the shelters up. But to my knowledge, there wasn't really any major issues that I heard of. I mean, there was one that was a report of someone that was denied access to the shelter, and then it turned out it was kind of a blown out of proportion sort of thing. So overall, I think it was handled pretty well. And thankfully, I don't think there was any major issues, but it's something I think the state was kind of aware of. I think later on Mississippi put out a statement, then AMS I think put out one that was kind of maybe a little bit more vetted, or it was one that was probably a better sort of statement overall. That was, but it was one of those things where we were trying to get something out there in kind of a short time period.
I don't know about you, James, but I felt like being Johnny on the spot was important in that situation, and it felt like the messaging was quick, and it was good here.
Yeah,
I don't think there was any effect on the performance of the Weather Service or any. To me, we were all so busy. Last thing I had to think about was this virus thing. We were focused and busy. And Chris, I think your office performed in an excellent, exemplary fashion for all those events in April.
I appreciate it. Thanks. I think it was good. I think the outlooks and the watches and overall, I think it was really good. I mean, obviously the big event was the 12th. The morning of the 19th was a big event too, in terms of the straight line wind damage. And of course, that was the blowback on that was why wasn't it a tornado? Because it had to be a tornado. It was so widespread. But that's just sort of, that just comes with the territory, of course. And but that was a challenging event too, in terms of, because it came the week after the Easter event, and people were sort of had that fresh on their mind. And that was also a moderate risk. So people were thinking, is it going to be bad like Easter was? And in retrospect, it really wasn't as significant. But like, as we tell people, I think you say it all the time, if it hits your house, it's really significant. So you try to like weigh the messaging there.
Hey, while we're talking about this, I want to bring in Kevin in, and Kim, I'll let you. I'm sorry, while it's fresh on my pea brain up here, we had the morning of the 19th, one of the nastiest Bo Echo signatures I've dealt with in years. This was an early Sunday morning. I want to say this was Sunday, and it was very life threatening, and it developed right on top of the community, and then it rolled on through several counties, and the severe thunderstorm warning initially was issued after it developed, and of course for the folks where it developed, they really didn't get a warning, and then it rolled on. But talk about the messaging with that thing, Chris. I mean, and Kevin, both of you, that I honestly think, and Kim, this is a Kim question. All these questions are Kim questions to some degree. What do people do when they hear a severe thunderstorm warning? What do they do? What do they do? their weather radio goes off and they hear severe thunderstorm warning. A lot of people don't listen to the text. They don't read it. They don't listen to it. They just hear it. And I sure get the idea that they just blow it off. Ooh, it's not a tornado warning. A tornado warning is sexy. I'm going to the basement. I'm putting on my helmet. I'm going to take a picture down here. I got all my stuff. I'm sheltered. But in a case like that, and the wording was really strong, but what do we do, Chris and Kevin, to better message the danger with this kind of thing? You can't issue a tornado warning because there's no tornado involved. But what do you do?
Another example of that is the Texas event where there was a 6-inch hail in West Texas. It verified a severe thunderstorm warning, but it was 6-inch hail that went through people's houses. So I'll let Kevin hit on it, but I actually texted Kevin over the weekend and said, hey, here's another severe thunderstorm warning. And I had a big picture of the basketball size hail that went through people's houses. It verified a severe thunderstorm warning, but basically it was like an EF1, EF2 tornado destroyed somebody's house. So I'll let Kevin talk about it.
Yeah. In some ways, I think we're a victim of our own success. We talk about our tornado warning stats in this office and going back for years, and I can't even begin to tell you the statistics behind severe thunderstorm warnings because it's just so arbitrary. There's no way how do you verify a severe thunderstorm warning? Obviously, the hail is pretty easy because it's either going to be 1 inch or greater or it's not. But as far as the wind is concerned, and when I go out and teach spotter classes, the thing I talk about is if you're in a storm that has 60 mile per hour wind, you will remember it forever because it's just so rare around here. And I've actually, in the past, and not for this particular event for the 19th on the Sunday, but in the past, I've actually asked forecasters, and I don't think we've ever done it, but I asked if you have a straight line wind event that gets above 70 toward 80, which probably this Bow Echo, at least, in some parts probably was close to that. Would you ever issue a tornado warning? And the answer I get is yes, because it's taken that much more serious than a severe thunderstorm warning. So that right there should tell you everything you need to know about where we are in the social science side of severe thunderstorm warnings. I can't verify them because I don't really know how to verify them. Every office has a little bit different criteria. Ours for years used to be if we had 2 trees down. Well, 2 trees can come down at 20 miles an hour, depending on what kind of tree. The Atlanta office has to have 7. So it's really arbitrary as the verification stats go. From a social side, like you said, I think people probably get annoyed that the weather radio is going off at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and they probably turn it off and go right back to bed if they even have a weather radio. So, and then they're awoken to trees crashing around their house, 20 minutes later. But, and I think we all have a small part there. And what about, and I'll toss the question back to you, James. And one thing about tornado warnings in this state, which you've always done, is go wall to wall. Well, does that minimize severe thunderstorm warnings? Because we don't think they're hot enough to go on television wall to wall with. So it's, it kind of builds upon itself. And I think at a time, severe thunderstorm warnings can basically happen any time of the year. And we've conditioned people to sort of deal with these 2 seasons, the fall and the spring season. So they kind of just basically go unnoticed, even though we've cut our, with the tornado warnings themselves, the volume of tornado warnings has come down over the past decade with the work that we've done. I also noted that the volume of severe thunderstorm warnings in this office has come down, way down as well, but I don't know if it's really had the same impact as the tornado warning volume.
Kim, what say you? Do we need a PDS severe thunderstorm warning? I mean, what do we need to do here?
I don't know.
And it sounded like Nate might have a thought on that too. He could go either the media direction or the social science direction. I'll just chime in.
You have the PhD, you go first.
That never makes someone go first. They should definitely wait for the experienced field opinions and then chime in with, hey, what we don't know. I mean, I'll tell you from the research side, severe thunderstorm warnings have gotten almost no attention because just like you're talking about with tornado versus severe thunderstorm warning messaging, research follows the sexier problem. We just don't have as much. We don't even know very much about how people behave in more ordinary tornado events. The only tornado events that really get the behavioral studies, the post-event studies, are the big, EF5s or outbreaks. So there are tornadoes that are ignored by the literature, let alone the severe thunderstorm phenomenon. So I would, Nate might have seen something I haven't seen in communication studies, something sizable.
I think the reality is that the severe thunderstorm warnings, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'll say it.
Go ahead,
because I think we all know it, right? The severe thunderstorm warnings, number one, there are too many of them. Number two, like you said, one tree branch comes down and the whole thing's verified. So one LSR of one tree branch of a certain diameter and we're good, or one quarter size or inch sized, hailstone and we verified it. So there's really no, I think if we were to go on wall to wall for every severe thunderstorm warning, like we do for every tornado warning, there are some markets that wouldn't see regular programming for months at a time. So that's not feasible. On the flip side, though, I will say that at least the stations that I work with, we have the latitude to be able to go on if we look at a severe thunderstorm warning and we feel like we got to ring the bell for this one. So, I would expect that, and our stations in Dallas did, go on the air, not wall to wall necessarily, but we're going on the air, interrupting programming, we're running crawls, we're putting the meteorologist on TV, what have you, for some of these, 5 and 6 inch hailstone type events or widespread 60 to 70 mile per hour. I think that the catch is that, you're looking at a mesoscale phenomenon, a microscale phenomenon of a mesoscale phenomenon, with a wind gust, and that can verify the entire warning. And that's what the Weather Service has to warn on. That's what they've got to do. And I don't begrudge you guys that at all. But I think it becomes incumbent on us as broadcasters, as broadcast meteorologists, to be looking at the data with you, to be interacting with you on NWS chat, trying to get a handle, what are our thoughts? What are your thoughts? And then stepping up or stepping down the response accordingly in order to be able to meet the demand. And so if it's a bad warning, let's go on the air. If it's a garden variety warning or a warning where, we're going to have that one tree branch, is that worth interrupting, the season finale of Survivor or whatever? No, there'd be people with pitchforks and torches at our door, and that's not what I think anybody wants.
Yeah, there's definitely a delicate balance to be struck there, and I wonder how you all feel about the philosophy, the sort of operational philosophy that you guys raised, where sometimes if you have a situation where it's a very severe wind threat, offices do go and issue tornado warnings, feeling it's the only thing in the arsenal that can draw the level of attention that the weather deserves. I personally feel, as much as I understand the philosophy of the HAZCINT program that's aiming to reduce the number of, watches, warnings, advisories that we have and make things more understandable, to me, this is one area where I think we've done ourselves a bit of a disservice in not distinguishing some higher end events. And I know people have concerns, and you may also on this panel have concerns. If we were to do that, would people even care about severe thunderstorm warnings anymore? And we don't know that they necessarily do to begin with. I do sort of worry that if people hear a tornado warning and then there's not a tornado, that they will lose some trust in the tornado warning product, because these are different phenomena. And I think people can understand, like a hurricane force wind, straight line wind, that, something like an extreme wind warning with hurricane force winds would accurately convey what's going on in a way that people would, resonate, take action. And to me, this is just screaming for a new product definition, but I'm interested in knowing what you guys all think about that.
So that's Kim, what I was about to say, Kim, was do we need to up the ante on the severe thunderstorm and think of something where it's an extreme severe thunderstorm warning, or is it time to adjust the severe thunderstorm warning criteria?
How about severe thunderstorm emergency?
Well, I'll state what I think Nate said a second ago. There are too many severe thunderstorm warnings. That's my opinion. And Kim, tell me I'm wrong, but the fact that if there are too many of those, those will actually take away the effect of the tornado warnings to some degree, because people are getting tired of hearing the weather radio go off, or they're hearing another warning coming out. So this is a sticky wicket. I don't know how you get out of it. I don't know how we clean it up, I don't think it's going to be easy, and it's not going to be as easy as just getting rid of the word advisory either. It's not. So
here's a good question for you. So as part of my NWA talk last year in Huntsville, I didn't get to give it, but I pulled that talk up. So,
chicken.
Wow. Jeez. That demands some slack.
So here's a good question for you. So year to year, we sound the weather radios for flash flood, tornado warnings, flash flood warnings, and severe thunderstorm warnings. How many a year do you think the CONUS gets? Any guesses? Per year, how many total warnings do you think we issue as an agency?
So sorry, was that all warning? You said flash flood, severe?
And tornado, yeah.
And tornado.
Does this include watches as well, or just warnings?
Just warnings. When we're actually asking somebody to take an action, how many times a year do you think we do that?
Say 3,000.
I was thinking around 3,000.
I was thinking like 20,000.
Yeah, I'll say 10.
Yeah, I was closer to thinking of what Kim was thinking.
What, 12,622?
I bet he's asking this question because it's not nearly as high as we think it is.
No. Are these Price is Right rules? Who wins?
That's and I love asking this question because most people who actually issue those warnings don't have a clue of how big that number really is. But it averages between 30 and 40,000.
Oh,
wow.
That tells you anything.
All right.
We're asking people to take some sort of action 40,000 times a year.
Wow.
Well, and how many people is that multiplied by? How many people were under those warnings? We'll have to ask the Weather Channel that question, I guess.
I'll tell you guys.
Well, here's the thing, though. And this is getting, into a rabbit hole that we can't go because it's just not possible. But in a sense, what we're doing when we have a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning is we, as the royal we, are deciding that this is bad enough that everybody in this box needs to know about it, right? Between the phones, whether, your We alerts, your cell phone apps, your crap apps, and your weather radios and your TV. And really, there may be people that have a higher threshold and don't want to know about some of that stuff. Like, I live at the top of a hill. I don't care about flash flood warning. Just leave those off. Or on the flip side, they may have a lower threshold. For example, there's some Twitter traffic today about lightning. I may not care as much about, a gust of wind somewhere in a 300 square mile box. But on the flip side, if it's a lot of lightning coming over my house and it's going to freak my kids out at 10 at night or make my dog go nuts or whatever, maybe I want to do that. And so in a sense, what we've done is we've collectively said, these are the thresholds that we're going to alert everybody for. And what we'd really like to do, maybe I'm wrong here, is give everybody an app, ask them what do you care about, and then let the Weather Service people just do the forecast the best they can, and then let the people choose the thresholds that they want to get alerted about.
So how far away are we away from that happening? That's the holy grail right there, Nate.
I think
that's where
AI can help with that. It's not people want to throw around Watson and AI and everything as this sort of Deus Ex Machina that's going to fix everything, and it's not. But I think it can help. All right, start with the defaults, and then let people use levers on their app or let the phone that follows me around everywhere get a sense of what sort of things.
There is no app. And that's where I swear I'm going to turn blue in the face with Louis in Washington. He knows that I'm telling this. The Weather Service.
What? There's no app, Troy?
We don't even have a way of really getting warning information to the general public. James does the brunt of it here, but most people have these pieces of crap now. They have these. If the Weather Service had an app and could let people select a severe thunderstorm warning for their area. The Weather Service, by the way, the Weather Service can do an app. I'm tired of hearing they can't. They can do an app. and just provide a general forecast. That's part of the mission statement, and warnings for the general public. They can do that, and they could nail that down in a second. And the sooner that Washington does that, the better that we'll all be served. And I think even the better Weather Service as an agency will be served. We've got to come up with something. Weather radio is great, but it doesn't cut it. We've got to find something.
Well, and the other piece of that, too, is all the probabilistic hazard information that's coming. So, tornadoes are, hard to nail down. So I care about a 30% chance that one's going to happen within 5 miles of me. I'm able to set that threshold, too. I mean, that's sort of big questions. And I feel like we're putting Chris and Kevin and the Weather Service in a bad spot, saying there are too many thunderstorm warnings. You guys know the stats. You're doing a great job. You got these requirements. You're meeting the requirements by and large. It's you're doing what's being asked of you. So it's not the Weather Service's fault. Sort of in general. I think it's just we're trying to do this one size fits all thing, and I don't know that it. I think people expect more, right? The phone tells me it's going to rain at my house in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, it starts to rain. It tells me I'm 5 minutes away from my destination. Well, why can't it tell me these other sorts of things about the weather using the smarts that we've got in our Weather Service offices across the country?
Let me interject something real quick here, and that is, I think in theory you guys are right. I mean, there is definitely some positives to that, but as James can tell you, Chris can tell you, and you all have been out in parts of Alabama, there's places I still can't get cell signal. Right. So I think, and unfortunately, those are the most vulnerable people in a lot of cases. I go back to Lee County from 2019. It may be a lot to ask for everybody to have a smartphone. I will admit a lot of people have them, but there's a lot that don't. And they don't have weather radios either. So there's something that we're still missing. And I think I've asked the Vortex Southeast group to cover this, and I think it's going to be on the table in the coming years. And Kim, if you're wanting to cover it, that'd be great too. But I think we don't even have a baseline of how many people on a day-to-day basis are even engaged in what's going on weather-wise. I think there's a select group. I think it's a lot smaller number than we probably think it is. And so when we actually put these warnings out, when you go on wall-to-wall coverage, you may catch a few more folks. But again, I think there's maybe a large 80%, I'd say 80%, who are not even actively engaged in weather discussion. And I think you've asked some of those questions before, Kim, so you may want to weigh in on that. But I don't even think we have a good baseline of how many people are involved in those day-to-day decisions, or even could make a decision into their house is being torn apart.
Kevin, let me ask you a question real quick, or you or Chris, and I'm just interested. In Alabama, would you say you have better NOAA weather radio coverage or better cell coverage? I'm interested.
I'd say probably the weather radio coverage might be better. I mean,
oh, really? Okay.
You mean penetration or aerial coverage by the signal?
Who can pick up the signal in both cases?
We have pretty good aerial coverage of weather radio, I would think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm about to go back into show, but I wanted to bring up one point to Kevin's point with the cell phone coverage, because we deal a lot with that here. I mean, we have a lot of people who have still dial-up internet here. Granted, we don't get the severe weather that Alabama does, but that's still another point. But take a situation like Nashville and Cookeville earlier this year when the warnings went out, but because cell towers went down, they were hit by the tornado. Those warnings didn't go out. And I saw a tweet from NWS Nashville. Someone sent a tornado warning that they just got on their phone a week later to NWS Nashville, because these cell phone towers went down.
Well, the WEA is not where we need it to be either, to be honest with you. The WEA part of the cell is not quite there yet.
Well, I mean, this is an anecdotal story, but I did a survey when I was in Huntsville. I won't list the county, but I did a survey after a pretty strong tornado. I did a survey of a couple of houses. They didn't have electricity or indoor plumbing. And I'm not talking about 20 years ago either. So I think we assume that we're living in the 21st century, and it's not always the case. Now that's anecdotal story, but I mean, that was, kind of eye-opening for me. But Aubrey's right. I mean, you have a big event, and the first thing that's going to fail is the cell phone. So we saw that in 2011. I was getting texts 2-3 days later that they were sent. So it's a challenge. I mean, I think everybody's brought up some very good points, some that we've already discussed ourselves. And to me, I think the biggest issue for us is kind of that lag time between the watch and the warning. I heard that over and over again in Lee County from people. And that's kind of the warning on forecast, probabilistic, all that's coming, but how do we communicate that? How do we communicate that to a population where we have, I think 17% of Alabama lives below the poverty level? It's one of the highest in the country. A lot of people, they're, I hate to say it, I mean, they're scrambling to find a car they'll actually take to work. So how do we get that information out to the people that need it? And that's a huge question, I think.
Yeah, I think a telling thing tonight on. Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead, Bill. I was just going to say.
No, I thought
that we have to come up with some kind of product for people that live in mobile homes, and we're going to go down that track here. That's what's the average lead time, Kevin? 12 minutes for tornado warning? 15?
Yeah, last year we had 13. Mm-hmm.
13. So and for most people who live in trailers, they need 30 minutes. And you can't always deliver a 30-minute lead time. Sometimes you get no lead time at all. And it's not realistic to expect somebody to sit in a community shelter for 6 hours during a watch box. That's not realistic. It's nasty in there. It's just so. And again, we've talked about this, and there's got to be some solution. But whatever it is, I think initially, and again, the probabilistic stuff and all this stuff is coming. You're right. But now I'm talking about next week, or if we have a tornado warning, what do we do? It would be nice if we could coordinate all of us a message. If you live in a mobile home here, then you need to go to a shelter now. But that it's not there yet. And if we're all saying different things and we're all having our opinions, I just think it needs to be coordinated. So that's a Kim, that's your problem. You got to figure this out.
It sounds like it's your problem, but I can say I sympathize. Actually, that's your problem. I mean, you're rather the solution. I think you're right on. And it was really interesting to me coming out, to Alabama after the Lee County event. I interviewed emergency managers and broadcasters and Kevin, the Weather Service Forecast Office, and I was trying to understand who feels that they have a responsibility to message to those populations in particular, and what are their strategies. And I found that no one really feels like it's necessarily their ball. So, your call to even try to unite broadcasters around that, saying this actually is ours. This is our responsibility, and let's come up with some strategy. You probably could. One of the things that I think is an encouragement to you all is while there are all these technology limitations that you've covered, and they are daunting challenges, there's also a lot of potential in the human network. And I think that that's one of the directions some of the social science is going. There are a lot of people who receive warnings not through any of these technologies, but they hear about the threat from their families, their friends, and neighbors. And I think if we give people more time, we actually give those networks more time to distribute those messages and to get people gathered and to do all the things they do. So, I don't think that we necessarily have to have a really high proportion of the population that's actually weather attentive, as long as people are connected to someone who feels like it's their responsibility for their friends and family to be aware. And I think that's actually more common than we'd imagine. In my post-2011 study, I found that those people were everywhere. That just, it'd be random mom or neighborhood person, or a child even who just had a real interest in weather. And they took it upon themselves to notify 20, 30 people sometimes that weather was coming. So if we can find a way to tap into those networks, we don't have to develop new technologies. What we can do is muscle up on community connection. And it's a whole different way of thinking about it. But this is one of the things the Vortex Southeast program is thinking about as they think about actually coming back to the states like Alabama and saying, okay, well, we've done this research. Now, what do the communities here actually need to make improvements on this? I expect that we'll hear human capital is going to be one of the areas of focus and not just technology capital, which we think about as our first thing because we're good at making technology as meteorologists. But, we're also really good at communicating with people and helping to spur action. And, broadcasters are going to play a key role in that. You're right. You don't have to wait for one on forecast technology. You might be able to do that today. And that could be another thing that you consider.
Well, I thought it was interesting today that Chilton County, the Board of Education there, said, the real limiting factor to, the COVID-19 situation was in teaching the kids at home was that, no one had access to broadband. They really underestimated how many people would not have access to the technology first. So they, distributed Chromebooks. But even with that, 65% of the parents took the hard copy paper packets because they didn't have broadband enough to do whatever it was that needed to be done. And so maybe something, that will be good that'll come out of this virus will be an attention to broadband in rural areas. So maybe that'll help to some degree.
Well, I could shed light on that too, because, I'm getting ready to start building a house in Chelsea, and I looked at property all over Shelby County, and you think Shelby County would have access to internet, just even dial up. There's a lot of places in Shelby County that do not have access to even lines being run down every street. It's just not happening. Even in a county as populous and as rich as this one. I mean, it's just not happening even in the county that we live in now.
Yeah, it's one of the fastest growing in the state, one or two all the time, and still has a long way to go. So, yeah, there's no question about that. And I think we kind of buried the lead there, Kevin. One thing you said, y'all have really reduced the number of severe thunderstorm warnings. And as a central Alabamian, user of this information, we appreciate that restraint. We see it all the time. And we follow it in the chat. We see what you say. You say we're gonna hold off. We're gonna do a special weather statement on this one, a significant weather advisory, and we appreciate that restraint. It's really, it's helped us a lot. I know. I'm sorry, James. Go ahead.
I want to brag on it too, Bill. The easiest thing to do is to hit that warning button. Ooh, we've got a couplet. We got this and that. We got a creepy cloud. We got a wall cloud. We got this guy on the tweeter. The easiest thing to do is hit that warning button over and over and over and over and over. So your POD is 99.9. So what if your false alarm ratio is 80? I mean, and so I don't think people appreciate that effort. I do, the restraint. And I've not walked a mile. I've never been to Kim's test bed. I would love to do that. I would love to walk a mile in their shoes so I could really know how hard it is. But I can imagine how hard it is to keep your finger off that button, knowing that if you miss a tornado, all the grief you're going to get and all da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But it's just, they have done, Bill, a masterful job down there. And we're not just saying that.
The interesting thing too is, from what you're saying is that even hitting that button time and time again, the POD numbers weren't any better. So we were still missing them, even though we had a colossal amount of warnings. The POD was never getting to the 90s or even to the 80s, and it's still not in a lot of places. So it hovers between 60 and 70. It hasn't moved in 25 years. And no matter what the volume of warnings, were or is on a year-to-year basis, it just wasn't ever improving, no matter how high that false alarm rate was. The false alarm rate is really out-tracking the POD at this point. So if that tells you anything, at least from a nationwide standpoint.
Yeah, a pine tree fall in my yard this morning. I didn't call it in, Kevin, so I didn't want to mess up your POD.
I pulled the numbers today, and I actually just looked at the tornado warning verification numbers, and Kevin's right. I mean, the numbers for Birmingham, if you do pre-2013 and post-2013, January 1st, 2013, The POD numbers haven't changed. I mean, the improvement has actually gone up a little bit, but the false alarm rate has gone down dramatically. And it hasn't affected the lead time. Lead time's actually improved. And that doesn't count 2011, which 2011, to be honest, the afternoon was kind of shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, it was just, pretty much just put a box around any storm that is spinning. I mean, everything was spinning. So, but the national numbers have not changed. And Kevin's right. I mean, the numbers are what they are. So, I mean, he's spot on. I looked down this afternoon.
What's the
so how did it go? To talk about the polygonology a little bit there, Kevin.
Well, the secret is the science. I mean, if you go back to the environments that exist for these tornadoes, it's not really that hard, to be honest with you. It's and Chris and I have talked offline several times. It's really not that hard. If you have weather information in front of you, you believe it, and you trust what you're seeing, then you can make very good warning decisions. And that's not to say in the past we made poor ones. I just think, like you said, we didn't have the information that we needed. And I think the short-term modeling, the environmental analysis has gotten so much better that we're able to utilize it on the spot, trust it, because that's a key. If you don't trust it, you can't, it makes the situation difficult. But then to utilize it in the warning situation properly is really the key to success.
So I'm interested, as the sort of more social scientist here, just what exactly that looks like when you're sitting there in the hot seat. Does that mean if you have an environment that looks more conducive, that you'd be more inclined? I mean, it seems to me that where you might be making gains is in these tougher cases where you have the shorter lived tornadoes and maybe more of these QCL or QLCS events where you have to make the call. Do we warn for a more ephemeral tornado or ephemeral feature? Is that kind of what's going on? Is that where you're looking at, maybe the environments that are more conducive to actually producing and maybe sustaining a tornado versus ones where you maybe get a brief spin up, but you don't think it could sustain enough to warn on it? How exactly does that work?
April 19th is a good example. I was actually working radar with one of our other forecasters, and our southern, James probably remembers this event, the warm front really was suppressed to the south, and we had a lot of morning convection. So the question was, how far north is the surface boundary going to get? So our far southern counties were sort of a little bit under the gun. So we had the storms that were lifting up out of Mobile, Tallahassee's area. They were spinning like a top in the late evening, but we were looking at the mesoanalysis, we were looking at the surface obs. We had northeasterly surface winds even down at Troy, which is our far southern counties you follow, which we don't have our ASOS still there. It was blown away last year, but we had some mesonet sites, northeasterly winds. So we didn't issue, me and the forecaster were talking about, we're not going to issue a tornado warning on this because the boundary layer is not conducive to it developing. Well, eventually that storm actually bowed out, very similar to the morning event that we were talking about earlier, and it produced a significant blowdown. I think we put 70, 80 mile an hour winds in the severe warning. So we didn't put a tornado warning, but there was pretty widespread wind damage. I mean, people thought it was a tornado, but that's an example. We were using the mesoanalysis to kind of hold off on a tornado warning. But there were tornadoes further south in Mobile's area. So certainly the environment was conducive further south, but not in our area.
So Chris, do you have a PDS severe thunderstorm warning in your arsenal? Is that part of the Weather Service toolkit, or is that not part of policy?
Not a tornado, not a severe thunderstorm emergency, similar wording, but we can ramp up the wording to put in like 70, 80 miles an hour, and the call to action is stronger. There is some discussions in the Weather Service to actually, I think, WEA alert if you have 80 miles an hour in your wording, but I don't know, Kim, you may know whether that's confirmed they're going to do that or not. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know for sure either. I've heard it though, as at least a policy that's being considered. And yeah. I think, as in light of the conversation we even had a little bit ago about this, seems to me to be a really interesting thing to consider.
Sure.
Hey, let me talk about FAR real quick. In my mind, I hang out in Dollar Generals, Walmarts, places where you guys don't go. I just, I hang out at the Dollar General in Gordo, and talking with people, I hear this over and over. I hear those tornado warnings all the time and nothing ever happens. Now, years ago, before the FAR came down. But I hear from social scientists that it's not that big of a deal. And so, Kim, I guess it's kind of a question for you. Is the FAR as big of a deal as we make it out to be? I got chewed out today. We got the face bag guys, showing the 384-hour hurricane models, major hurricane coming up into Mobile Bay in 15 days. And, I fussed at him a little bit, and somebody just chewed me out, saying they follow this guy, and I don't care if he's wrong. Every single time he lets me know that it might happen in 15 days. He doesn't care if it's wrong. So what is FAR a big deal or not?
Yeah.
Kim, you tell me. These people are the people that follow these face bag guys. They do it with a religious zeal. And if you come up against them, they will attack you. They will attack your family, your mama, your church. They'll come after you. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And they just post these 384-hour deterministic maps to get likes and shares. And it's the most bizarre thing. But the people that follow them don't care. I don't care if he's wrong every time. At least I know that it might happen. So it's like, let me just post that an asteroid's going to hit the Earth next week. Let me just keep posting that. And maybe I'll get a bigger following, get a bunch of likes and shares. So is FAR a big deal or not? Sorry.
I think
I'm unhinged.
There's two slightly different issues in what you're talking about. One is a huge societal issue with sort of doomsday prophecy, which is definitely, that's where you're sort of trending there. There's a whole thing about people who are just very attuned to the possible negative, catastrophic outcomes that could occur, and they don't necessarily seek to verify if anyone has truthfully prophesied, but they just really are interested in looking to that horizon and seeing what's possible. So there's definitely that undercurrent in society happening. But one of the things you're touching on with the false alarms in the shorter term weather warnings paradigm, not quite as far out, not quite as catastrophic of a forecast. I think we have conflicting studies. So you look at some places after some kinds of events, and you might see people talk about previous false alarms having influenced their decisions. This is something that came up in Joplin. But if you look at the local situation, what had been going on in Joplin in the previous 3 years before that tornado occurred, they had, in the transition to polygon warnings, just experienced a much higher volume of warnings than had occurred before 2008. And so the population just looked at that and sort of said, maybe this being out on my Sunday afternoon, there hadn't been a lot of hype about the potential for severe weather before that day. Maybe false alarms weighed in on those choices to some degree. But if you look at some larger scale studies where we look across the whole country and we do research where we look at how much do you trust the warning and are you willing to act on it, and we compare that to local false alarm ratios, things get a little less clear. It looks like it's really just a very local problem where it might occur. And, we don't actually have a great answer because of that. The large scale studies seem to suggest it might not be the problem that we all thought it was. And to some degree, that's kind of heartening. Maybe people aren't holding things against us as much as we fear that they are, only in extreme circumstances, maybe. And, extreme is hard to define, but if you have 4 to 5 times the number of tornado warnings than you'd been getting in previous years, maybe that's something people start to listen to, like what was the Joplin case. So yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I'm grateful to hear what Kevin and Chris are describing, that there's been an advancement in technology that maybe allows us to not have to worry so much about this anymore. Because there had been concern that if we'd worked so hard to bring down the false alarm ratio, what will happen to the POD? And in the social science community, we were very concerned with that. Well, what will happen if people start missing the warnings and there are tornadoes hitting them more often? Might there be really significant hits to trust for that? But it sounds like that's not happening. And that's a really good piece of news, because technology advanced. You don't have to have that sort of trade-off. I think you're while the social sciences can't answer that question about what's perfect, you guys are definitely plowing ahead and making things better. And more than anything, that's the right direction to go.
but Kevin, you said, there's 40,000 warnings issued nationally. How many tornado warnings do I come under at my house here in an average year? What would that number be? 2, 3, 1, sometimes 0?
Yeah, I think that's one thing we proved as well. With the early, I think this was before Vortex Southeast, back just after 2011, when Laura Myers over, I think she was still at Mississippi State then. We asked. That was one of the questions that she asked of people: is how many times do they perceive that they're under a tornado warning a year? And they were about 5 to 10 times too high, and that was even in our previous era when we were, hitting the button, as James said, on every spinny storm. So now it probably varies. I would say most of the time it's 0, but it depends on the year, but a handful. And there are some hot spots. I'm not a big believer in the geography, but there's definitely something to the hot spots, especially those that come out of Mississippi over in Pickens and Fayette, Tuscaloosa counties. That little zone through there is, I call it the triangle. It's the triangle between Huntsville, Birmingham, and Jackson, Mississippi. If you live in that triangle, you better have a plan, because that's sort of the hot zone in the southeast. So it's not very many that we're asking you to take some sort of protective measure. But again, I can't help but thinking that A, people may not have a plan, and B, they're probably not weather aware just in general terms in their day-to-day lives, and that nobody likes to be inconvenienced.
And no way to know whether they were really in the polygon or not, unless you had a sophisticated weather app, maybe radar scope or something that would show you, or, WDT or something that would tell you were in the polygon. Because even if you might not actually have been physically in the polygon. You could have been just outside it. Had an interesting flash flood warning here Saturday night, because my house was in the flash flood warning, which maybe y'all can comment on it. I thought that was a cool flash flood warning, because most of the rain fell well to the northeast in Jefferson County. None even fell at my house. I think we got 200s. Was that anticipatory of development that you saw kind of forming back building to the southwest, or do y'all know what the rationale was with that warning? I thought that was a pretty cool flash flood warning, because in a lot of situations that could have developed.
Yeah, I believe they were anticipating the building to the southwest. I saw it too. And
I was hoping that would happen, and it didn't happen, Chris.
I think they were also looking at the gauges there, upstream, and they were thinking that they might see runoff right there along that kind of same little area that floods.
I thought that was a very forward-thinking flash flood warning. I really,
I do know that. Speaking of WEA, I do know there's still issues that we still get reports of the alerts outside the polygons, and we still push those up. So it's one of those things that when we go to WEA 3.0. And more phones are upgraded, that will get better. But it's just a matter of time. And until then, we'll continue to push those reports up to headquarters.
I know Troy gets his underwear starts flapping in the breeze, as James says, when we talk about IT. Talk about IT challenges at the Weather Service, Chris. And
you mentioned the WS chat earlier, and I almost made a joke about it then. So, but obviously, chat's kind of been the biggest challenge that we've had. That's it's a huge issue. The long-term solution is to eventually kind of replace NWS Chat with another software package. That's the long-term plan of the Weather Service. The short-term plan is to transition to a new server, and that's supposed to take place within about a year, I think. I'd say long-term. Whether the year is, I say short-term. A year is short-term in the Weather Service. So that's what we're working on right now. But one of the things that we're trying to do as an office is to kind of streamline who needs to be in NWS Chat. There's a lot of folks that are sort of one-way communicators, and those folks probably don't need to be necessarily in NWS Chat. We're also trying to make sure that people are using Pigeon and not Chat Live, because the web-based version of chat really bogs the system down. So we're working some of those issues too. So chat's probably a big one. We're actually trying to fill our IT position at the office too. We've been without an IT person at the Weather Service office in Birmingham for almost 3 years. So over 3 years.
I think you ought to hire Troy. You ought to hire Troy Kimmel.
Well, Troy, it's going to be bid back out, so you can always apply for it.
He can't unmute his line. How can we hire him as an IT?
What was that, Kevin?
He can't unmute his line. How can we hire him as an IT?
Step number one. I had to unmute mine to begin with. So.
Also, show title.
Yeah.
So we're gonna that job will be bid back out here shortly. Hopefully, get that filled. But that's probably the biggest one. I mean, as Kevin mentioned earlier too, with the new telework paradigm, we're going to be looking at probably how we can sort of do more of our job remotely. I know the media folks have been doing that as well. And we'll be looking at that on the Weather Service side, kind of going forward. We've learned on the fly. So, Kevin, do you have any other things you want to pass along on the IT side?
Yeah, I think the big thing with chat too, and is it's a victim of its own success, right? We designed it and it's been very successful, which people gravitated toward it. And there's also one key thing that probably should be changed with it, and that is once you have access to chat. So if the Birmingham office allows you access to chat, you can you can lurk in any room that you want to across the nation. So that allows for people to go into hot spots where, Central Plains this time of year, you'll have, 500 people in the Norman chat. Well, 100 of those may be the ones that Norman approved to be in their chat, but yet there's folks from all over. I've been guilty of it myself, of just kind of lurking in the background. So I think they're looking to make those changes too, where people can lurk, but they can't really interact. And I think that'll be a huge positive as well.
Well, how long will it be before they deprecate the web-based version? Because they've been threatening that forever. It looks like that'd be a simple solution.
I asked that as well. I mean, they need to sort of cut the apron strings with that and be done with it. It's amazing. You can look, I actually kind of pulled the Easter logs, and you can see right before the thing completely crashed, the number of the Chat Live users was going straight up, and then it just completely crashed the whole system. And it's really not that hard. You can download Pigeon. There's another couple of versions, a couple other apps too. They'll run it. If you're on a Mac, there's one for Mac. I think it's Idiom or
Adium. Adium X. Adium X.
Yeah. So and actually, I used to be a Chat Live person myself, and I've switched over to Pigeon full time, and I actually like it better. So, and we played around with Slack too. I know I chat with James. I'm on his Slack account, and the Weather Service may eventually go to Slack. I mean, that might be something that we do a couple of years down the road. I know there's something we're looking at, like I said, alternative chat versions.
Yeah, I think that the nice thing about Slack is that you can share video and images, and it is a very robust type platform. And again, it would be great to be able to share that, confidentially within that group, so we could talk about it. So. Yeah, but something needs to be done to get. And again, Daryl Hertzman has done a great job. Does Daryl still have anything to do with this, or has he handed it off to somebody else?
I don't think he has anything to do with it. Troy, do you know?
No, he's washed his hands of it. It's now at Weather Service headquarters. So
yeah,
we need to get Daryl back.
But Daryl did a great job spinning it up. Yep.
Troy, you mentioned HazSimp. Talk about the hazard simplification process from y'all's standpoint, Chris and Kevin. Maybe y'all can't speak about it right now because you're trying to get commentary on it, but removing the word advisory or moving all those advisory products and kind of boiling them down into special statements seems to be a direction that we're kind of going. Do significant weather advisories stay in that mix? Those polygon-based things, do they go completely away? How do y'all feel about significant weather advisories?
My understanding, and Kevin can speak to this, my understanding is significant weather advisories won't be part of it. This is more the watch warning advisory paradigm. We called it WAWA for years, so now it would just be the WAWA without the Well, I don't know what we're going to call it now, but which is funny. When I first got in the Weather Service, we used something called traveler advisories. Some of y'all may remember that.
Remember those well.
Those were the greatest. Those were the greatest.
Yeah, and that was sort of a catch-all, but people found them very useful. And ultimately, that's what it was. It was an impact to travel. And we're probably going to just start having the catch-all special weather statement now, which is ultimately what that was back then. I kind of know where we're going with it, but I'm curious to see. I don't want to taint the jury.
Can't prejudice the results.
But I'm kind of curious to see what the feedback's going to be.
Chris, what you just to make sure I understand what you're saying? In other words, a significant weather advisory will essentially become a special weather statement, as most of the advisory things would, right?
That's pretty much
it already is.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And Kevin, that's correct, right? I mean, it's not really changing. We may just end up having to change the terminology slightly on it.
Yeah, I think so. And it makes sense to do this because if I'll take winter weather, for example, if we issued a winter weather advisory or winter weather warning, it can be for a number of things. And we used to have to juggle a million products based on the phenomenon that was falling from the sky. In the meantime, folks who actually receive these warnings and make decisions based on them had no clue the difference between them. Flooding is another example. We have a million different flood products to choose from, and they've basically simplified a lot of that as well. So, I mean, either it's raining, it's going to flood at your house, or it's not. I mean, does it matter if it's coming in the form of a flash or aerial flood, or if we're asking you to take action based on something, then that's sort of the bottom line on it. So I think that's definitely the right move. And we've actually implemented that, I guess, about 2 weeks ago. We'll probably issue our first actual warning with it come November, but we actually went to the flooding part of the simplification just a few weeks ago. So we have that ready to go.
So does that mean no more aerial flood advisories out of our office, or what is that? Does that mean policy at this point? Can you say?
I believe, Chris, you tell me, but I believe some of that. I think the advisory now is just it's like a two-tiered system. So I think the warning is basically taking place of that, and then what's going to alert on WEA, I think, is the upgraded version. So it has to be a higher end flash flood before it alerts on the WEA, whereas it used to, it just picked up everything. So I think that's the way it's going to work now. In fact, I need to follow back up with the guys who issued over the weekend because it should have been done with the new system. So I'll be sure to do that.
Kevin, let's talk about coordination with the adjacent offices. I've said this before, and it's something we struggle with in the television business. DMAs don't make sense to anybody. Designated market areas. You know, these TV markets have a certain number of counties, and then you cross a line and you're in this next TV market. But so many people like consume products and services. Yeah. They consume products and services in a digital platform where this stuff doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the TV signal ends. And it's the same thing with CWAs and the Weather Service. How's the coordination process with your adjacent offices, because you got a bunch of them to coordinate with?
I'd say overall, I think the coordination is good. I mean, obviously, you know, I've been in the state for a long time, and, you know, I came from the Huntsville office. I was there for 16 years. So I think the coordination generally is good with Huntsville. I know Jeff Medlin from Mobile. Jeff's he's another NC State grad. So got plenty of Wolfpackers in the state. So and I know Tom John, still in the little Wolfies there. So and I know Tom Johnstone in Tallahassee. We've had a couple of kind of group meetings actually for the Alabama MIC. So I think in general the coordination is good. I mean, and Kevin has been very active in the Sioux realm, kind of working those channels as well. I mean, sometimes you'll see sort of, you know, and it's human nature. I'll just speak freely. I mean, you see some of the warning decisions might not be completely the same from one office to another, and that's something that we try to kind of work back channels to address and talk about, because you guys are on the media side of it, so you have to coordinate that. I know, you know, it goes from one. Like I said, it may be the same DMA, but it might be separate CWAs, and you sort of have to kind of nuance that live on the air. So we try to make that as transparent as possible. I think we're getting better at that, but there's always things that we can improve upon as well.
It's been very noticeable with the work we've done with tornado warnings. And in fact, a lot of our westernmost counties, you know, the Jackson office will have or Memphis will have a tornado warning up against the state line that doesn't get continued in Alabama. A lot of times that's happening. And we'll hear from the emergency management teams over in the Pickens, Sumter, Lamar, Marion counties who actually have noticed that quite a bit. It's been a little bit mixed, but I think we've, especially at first, it's like, why are you not continuing this warning? We need a warning. But I think now we've gained their confidence in that we have done better with our warning techniques, and I think they now understand that a lot better. So there was definitely an adjustment period though, because naturally you want to continue that warning on, and then there's success stories too on the other side of the CWA. Lee County Day was good because we have a tornado emergency philosophy. I'll say in our office, it's basically forecaster discretion. Atlanta has a very strict tornado emergency policy. So that was like the first tornado emergency they issued there for Columbus and probably maybe forever in their office. So that was coordinated. They saw that when coming from a long way away, and it went, another, probably 30, 40 miles into Georgia where they had a tornado emergency. So that's another good example of coordination that needed to happen right there. So
is it true? Let me chase a rabbit here. I've heard that in some offices, they don't issue a tornado emergency unless the storm affects a population center. Have y'all heard of that? Kim, Chris, Kevin, anybody?
That used to be the old policy. I mean, that was kind of the old policy that the Weather Service had, that it had to affect a certain population center to actually issue the tornado emergency. That was sort of done away with, I think, I don't know if it was post 2011, but it was in one of the recent updates. If that's being done, that's sort of a legacy sort of mentality. Kevin, do you know anything?
What I'm chasing here is that somehow, and I believe this to be true, that if you live away from a city, then your life's not important. If you live in a rural setting, so what? If you live in a city, we're going to take care of you. Tornado emergency. We're live, local, late breaking, on the air, always. But the minute, some of these TV stations go off the air when it gets out of a city, there are no tornado emergencies. And maybe that's changed, which is great. But I still believe within the weather enterprise to some degree, and I'm not faulting anybody here, but in some places, people that live in rural areas are simply discriminated against. And I hate that because I am from rural South Alabama.
I will go a little farther than that and tell you that people who live east or downwind of the main population center don't get the kind of coverage that the people west of the population center do, because if it hits the population center, then all of a sudden all of the attention goes to, let's cover all the stuff that's happening. And then, by the way, you're having to wave my hands over here. Stuff tornadoes on the ground. We need to talk about those too.
Now, it did like April 27, 2011. So Tuscaloosa was hit. Horrible, horrible, catastrophic tornado. So the news people, their underwear was flapping up down their leg. Go to Lot 8, REM 3, REM 5. You won't believe the video. You won't believe this. No. That stinking tornado is still on the ground, and I've got 3 others. I can't do that. And I'm very thankful that I have the ability to control that. But I know in some cases the Mets don't have that control. And you're exactly right, Nate. You hit the nail on the head.
Week and a half before that event, I literally was having to stand off camera waving at the anchor to say, we've still got tornadoes, plural, on the ground. I know that drives people nuts. It's a redundancy, but it is what it is. That, we've got these tornadoes we need to cover. I said, a little bit of damage goes a long way. Show me that this thing is actually doing something. But then we got to actually track this thing and tell people where it's going so that we can keep them safe too.
Well, you get the advantage of, I've seen the coverage from you guys. You have the advantage of double, triple boxing, so you can sort of show multiple things. But I think there is an advantage to seeing the actual tornado, seeing the damage. I think that sort of ramps up people's the thought process behind taking action as well. So I think there is a key element to showing some of that live, because that sticks in their minds, and they
and that's what they do. They do the double box thing. Yeah.
It's absolutely, a reason to show it. I think the catch is when it takes over, or when the meteorologist having to, jump back in or beg for time, when it might actually be worse downwind than where it was here. and we've got to talk about it. I think that the challenge is that once, to James's point, underwear flapping in the wind, once you've got somebody on the ground, they feel like they need to go to this reporter who's talking about damage, and it's compelling, but if I've got tornadoes on the ground, that needs to take priority.
Chris, talk for a minute about the Lee County tornado, your personal experience going there and the takeaways that you had coming away from that terrible series of storms.
So I've done a lot of surveys in my career. I mean, obviously I was in North Alabama in 2011. I was there for Super Tuesday. The Lee County was different. I mean, I wasn't in the office that Sunday. I was, oddly enough, I was watching radar scope, checking out what was going on. I was in chat, and I got the text from one of our senior forecasters, and she said, "Hey, it looks really bad down there. Do you think you could get down there?" And I actually was already, kind of throwing a go bag together, and I was about ready to head out the door. And when she texted me and said, "Hey, I'm on my way," and I got from my house in Chelsea to the EOC in Lee County in about an hour and 45 minutes. That's a 2 hour and about 10-minute drive, probably. I probably shouldn't admit that, but I was on 280 and I passed a cop there. I didn't realize it was a cop. I passed him. I was going 110 on 280. Wow. And he just flashed his lights at. All he did was flash his lights at me. He didn't even do anything else. And I guess the old good rule of thumb is if you're going that fast, you don't slow down. And I just kept on going. So I didn't even let the gas. So.
Jail in Virginia for that. Did you know that?
Yeah, UVA. I'd go to jail. Yeah, Virginia. Yeah, and I didn't have a radar detector though. If you get pulled over like going that fast in Virginia, you go to jail and under the jail with a radar detector.
Yeah.
Good to know. Anyway. I'm going 110 tomorrow.
and put your radar detector away, Aubrey.
Yeah. We always when I was in college, we always let the radar detector in the dorm when we were going to Virginia. So I got to the EOC there.
I like it.
So I met one of the state coordinators. We went directly down Highway 51. Had no idea how bad it was really, and we got down, long story short, we got kind of to the disaster area, literally 4 o'clock, maybe 4:10. So it's just a couple hours after the storm moved through. And we got there right at the intersection of County Road 39 and County Road, I guess that was Cade Mill 39. And first house we went up to there, me and Ricky, first house we went up to, it was a house where the young lady passed away, the nurse passed away. And right as I was going up to the front of the house, I tripped over something in the dark and didn't kind of realize what it was. And I'd actually tripped over her torso. And I didn't realize at that point that I looked over and I realized I'd tripped over her torso. And then Ricky yelled at me in the dark, Ricky Adams, he said, "Hey, I found the rest of her body." And at that point, I just knew that I was sort of in over my head there. And so we kind of stopped what we were doing and we just started helping with rescue and recovery. And the next house we got up to, this young boy had just gotten home and he'd found his parents and his grandparents. He'd found their bodies. And I remember I think he worked for Comcast. He had his Comcast shirt on. He was he was really struggling. And I was kind of holding him up there by the car. And his sister, which I didn't know was his sister at the time, his sister came up to me and she said, do you want me to show me where I found my mama's body? And she said, well, most of her body. And her mother was wrapped around a tree. And so we just kind of helped her. We helped them as best we can. And we didn't go to a lot more houses. I just kind of called back to the office and said, "Hey, this is really bad." And we kind of helped as best we could. Mostly what we did was just get out of the way. And Ricky, Ricky hasn't been in EMA a long time, and I don't think he'd seen anything like that either. So it was pretty tough.
Kevin, what about your experience there?
was different than April 27th because I think April 27th, it was just so unbelievable. You're almost just a walking zombie with just so much damage and carnage. It almost wasn't real, but I think the difference was, and Chris, you probably can attest to this, the Lee County one was real. For some reason, it just seemed a lot more, and it's not to take anything obviously away from April 27th, but it just seemed like it was, there was a road where I think it was 12 family members lived on one road, and I think it killed almost all of one family. There might have been one survivor left who lost everybody. And, kind of dealing with it more on a personal level, because you're really there with one storm, you're interacting with those people on a day in and day out. And I think the story that got to me the most, and that I still have nightmares about to this day, was one of the young girl who died. I think she was 7, 9, I can't remember, but right after the neighbor had survived in her well-built home, and she found the girl laying there, and she was basically taking her last breaths, and she heard all these people screaming, in the rain that was still going on, and she just knelt beside her and held her hand because she didn't want her to be alone for her last breaths. And I think that just hearing that was really hard for me to take. And so just those intimate stories like that, and just dealing with people one-on-one. So, that was, I'll never forget that, obviously. So it's just hard to hear that. So those personal stories like that. So I think each one affects you differently. I just, sometimes I wake up, and I know, James, we talked about this before. It's hard to know how many more of these kind of days we can take. And I'm afraid we're in for some more, unfortunately. And so we know we have a job to do, but at the same time, it's easy to sit in a windowless studio and in an office and not, think of it as affecting real people, but this is affecting real people. So that was sort of the hard one for me.
And I hope everybody understands that sometimes what we do is serious business, and just give us the freedom to do what we need to do, and understand if the storm doesn't affect you and your neighborhood, what has just been described as happening maybe just right down the road, and have some compassion for those people, and allow the Weather Service and meteorologists to do their job, because again, every once in a while, this gets to be serious stuff. And on that note, we have to pause really quick for Tony Rice. And we're going to come back with Aubrey's email inbox. Then everybody on here has got to have a pick of the week. So Chris and Kevin, you got about 4 minutes to figure out a pick of the week. So let's listen to Tony's report. We'll be right back as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Eyes will be to the skies this Wednesday as NASA looks to return human spaceflight to U.S. soil for the first time since STS-135 launched back in 2011. SpaceX is set to launch the Demo 2 mission with Bob and Doug for the International Space Station. No, not Bob and Doug McKenzie, astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. See, Bob's a former Air Force pilot, and Doug was in the Marine Corps. Both are colonels, and both were test pilots who were accepted into the same NASA astronaut class in 2000. Each has been to space twice, and both married PhD astronauts, Bob to oceanographer Megan MacArthur, and Doug to mechanical engineer Karen Nyberg. That's a lot of smart people involved, but the focus on Wednesday afternoon will likely be on one person, the launch weather officer from the 45th Weather Squadron at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Daily forecasts for crewed spaceflight began coming out about 3 days before launch. Sundays and Mondays were nearly identical, with a 60% chance of conditions which violate launch criteria. Primary concerns were flight through precipitation and or thick clouds, but there's also a concern about lightning-producing cumulus clouds in the area. This is an instantaneous launch, so the launch window is essentially a second wide. Any postponement is going to push the launch to the next available opportunity, which is on Saturday, May 30th at 3:22 p.m. Eastern or Sunday, May 31st at 3 p.m. Eastern. Forecasters aren't just looking at the Florida Space Coast. They include more than 50 points along the path to orbit, which stretches across the Atlantic all the way to Northern Ireland. Launch weather criteria is a little stricter than previous SpaceX launches because this includes not only cargo, but also people. The Crew Dragon criteria is simpler, though, than the shuttle program because there's only a single abort mode to consider, and that would land the crew and their capsule in the Atlantic Ocean. So they do include wave heights in their considerations. The Space Shuttle had a number of other abort modes. None were ever used, but each was part of the go, no-go weather decision that was made for each launch. This included monitoring conditions at landing sites in France, Spain, and England for what was known as a transoceanic abort. Additional conditions at the Kennedy Space Center were also considered that would enable the shuttle to glide back for RTLS, or return to launch site. All that being said, missions have launched with far worse forecast and have been scrubbed under far better forecast. The chances of being able to launch during a given window are truly 50-50. Either the conditions are right or they aren't. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, time now for Aubrey to dive into that magical email inbox to see if there's anything here this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right. We're going to start with Rob Strucker, who often sends us some emails. So thank you for this one, Rob. As I listen to the shows in the archives, up to 597, by the way. That's progress. That's some great progress. Whenever I hear the chemtrail stinger, I have to say it out loud. My 12-year-old autistic daughter has heard me a few times and does it too, giggling. Just wanted to share that the show... just did it again, that the show fun has been passed through this fan to his daughter. So thanks, Rob. We appreciate that. Matthew Farley sent us a listener survey response. And Matthew found us through YouTube, going through May 31st tornado videos. Our show was mentioned in the comments regarding Mike Morgan.
Ooh. Show 404.
And... 404.
The most appropriately numbered show ever.
It really is. You could not have picked a better number for that show.
This one comes in from Gavin Groth. I'm sure you all have heard about the flooding in Michigan and the Midwest, of course, with the 2 dam failures. Very scary stuff. The Edenville Dam failed with about 4 to 5 inches of rain. So Gavin did some research, and it turns out that 85% of the dams in the U.S. will have reached the end of their original 50-year life expectancy in 2020. So Gavin asked what we thought, and Bill had already reached out to a filmmaker. Bill, do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, there was a great film a couple of years ago. I saw it at Telluride at the Mountain Film Festival called Damnation, which was about, decommissioning, dams that weren't needed anymore. And I thought that would be a good angle. Plus, the dams that are obsolete. And so I thought, we bring those 2 things together might be fun to talk about. So, that'll be a good show. We've got it tentatively scheduled out in June or July, some point out there. Thank you, Aubrey.
Awesome. So thanks, Bill, for that. And thank you for your emails. If you want to send us an email, a guest suggestion, or maybe a cool link or just some cool information, you can email us, email@weatherbrains.com. Love to hear from you.
And Kim, while you got the mic, let's see. Aubrey, while you got the mic, Aubrey, let's get your pick of the week. Let's go. Pick of the week. Here we go.
Okay. So my pick is a tweet from Mid-Atlantic ChaserCon, which I do help out with in Richmond every fall. And right now we are on hold, and we will hopefully make a decision soon regarding COVID and the opening and all that good stuff. So you can follow us on Facebook, Mid-Atlantic ChaserCon on the website, or on Twitter, and we'll keep you updated if we decide to go through with the conference, do something digital, or just hold everything until next year. But it's a great event, and we've got some good speakers lined up. So this year or next year, at some point, we'll do that.
Sounds good. All these picks will be up on weatherbrains.com. All right, Troy Kimmel, what you got for us this week?
Well, we got, and this is, we really haven't talked, I don't guess, about this so far, but last Tuesday night, a week ago tonight on PBS, was the Dr. Tornado special on Theodore Ted Fujita, which, by the way, was one of the best. I mean, it was amazing. I learned new things, just really amazing things. But Marshall Shepard had earlier that day in Forbes magazine published an article about the 7 things that Dr. Ted Fujita has taught us through the years, things he's contributed. And so that's my pick of the week. It was the Forbes article from last Tuesday. And if you haven't seen this Dr. Tornado segment yet, please go and see it. It's amazing.
Very good. All right, Nate, what's on your mind? Go. Pick of the week.
You heard Tony Rice talk about the launch weather criteria for the Crew Falcon launch tomorrow, Launch America. That is my pick of the week is the actual list of the launch criteria for that. If you want to get into detail about what it takes weather-wise to launch our first couple of astronauts off U.S. soil in way too long.
Exciting stuff. It's going to be a fun day tomorrow. Hope they get that thing off. All right, Kim, what you got for us this week?
So I know that with our guest last week, where we were talking a little bit more about hurricanes, hurricane season's getting to be on our mind. My pick of the week is a letter from Senator Wicker from your neighboring state of Mississippi to Neil Jacobs, the acting administrator of NOAA. And I thought it was actually really neat. He's just looking ahead to hurricane season and asking NOAA to work with other federal agencies like FEMA and CDC and state, local governments and social scientists. We were called out in this letter, which was really cool, to try to develop a plan for weighing the risks of multiple hazards as hurricane season approaches. So much as the tornado problem wasn't a fun one to try to handle, and you guys did really gracefully, trying to deal with this with no time to think about or evaluate what you had to do. There's a little more time ahead of hurricane season. And it's a little thornier. So I was really excited to see this letter and just a little bit of a look behind the scenes at how the federal government is trying to marshal itself up to be prepared.
Excellent. All right, Chris Darden, what's your pick of the week?
I was trying to think of one. I'm kind of drawing a blank here. I just say maybe.
We can give you the foghorn if you want.
I was just going to say maybe the hurricane outlook for this year. Just be prepared. We didn't talk at all about hurricanes, and I was just sitting through Mobile's training today. Mobile's doing a great job of kind of really hitting their partners remotely since they can't do any of the roadshow stuff, and they really do a great job along with Tallahassee, kind of really their coastal partners, and they have a lot of great stuff on their webpage. But I mean, really, obviously, it looks like it's going to be an above normal year this year with the what might be trending toward at least a moderate La Nina. So 2020's overachieved so far this year. So I'm afraid that the tropical season might overachieve as well. So really go to the Hurricane Center page and also go to Mobile and Tallahassee's page to kind of get spun up on the tropical season.
That sounds good. All right, Kevin Laws, what you got for us? I know you got something good. Go.
Oh, yeah, I'll go old school. My favorite weather model site of all, Pivotal Weather. I love the model soundings. It's almost impossible to get weather model soundings from high resolution. They even have the high res Euro on there now with forecast soundings, and those are my favorite things. So that will definitely be my pick of all time.
Yeah, and listen, those guys do have a pay option now where you can get a few more products and services. And if you can't support them, they do. I agree, Kevin. That's a great site, pivotalweather.com. And again, the link's going to be up on WeatherBrains.com. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, when I was a high school student and interested in tornado genesis, I wrote Dr. Joseph Golden and asked him to send me some information. And he sent me a NOAA technical memorandum that I treasure. And it came to my mind Sunday, which was the anniversary of the Union City tornado in 1973. The first tornado vortex signature. So I pulled it out, and it's a collection of writings about that tornado, the meteorology, the mesoscale, the Doppler data, the field observations, and that document was truly groundbreaking. I feel very lucky to have that. You can download it from the NWC library. So that's my pick of the week.
Awesome. All right, guys. So thank you, guys. We have to wrap this thing up. Now, next week, I will be back in good old – what? Oh, Jen. Sorry. Go.
I know I've been silent.
Every single week I miss somebody. Jen, go.
It's I'm looking at a tornado history event, May 26, 1917. The National Weather Service, Central Illinois, did a fantastic overview of the Mattoon-Charleston tornado disaster, the Illinois' third deadliest tornado disaster. So that's my pick.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And again, every week I miss somebody. It's just like magic. But I do have to go do the late news here in a few minutes. Next week, I'll be back in Studio A, so you guys can talk all night long. We're back to the old system here. But anyway, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. The show notes on the site as well, weatherbrains.com. Thank you guys for listening. Have a marvelous weekend. God bless. Thanks, everybody.
Chris and Kevin. Yeah, great
show. You guys
show.
were awesome. This was a fun show. Thank you, guys.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks,
Chris.
Take care. Bye.
We'll see you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. All right. So what we're going to do here is disconnect the
I don't know how to
session here. So we are going to end that. And it was very good. Okay. Thanks for the feedback. And so now we're going to stop the share. We are on Zoom. Thank you guys for watching. And again, next Monday night, we'll be back on the regular time and back on Zoom. And we'll be back in my office at the TV station. So the guys can just keep on talking. But I got to go do some television. Thank you guys. You'll have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.